Hey everyone, quick question for you. How much of your life do you think you spend sleeping? Just shout in your guesses. 1/3, yes. Now tell me who has a very good bed at home. Just raise your hand. Yeah, like almost everyone. This makes sense because if you spend as much as 1/3 of your life with something, of course you want to have the best equipment for it. Now what else do we spend 1/3 of our lives with? Debugging, meetings, useless meetings, composition versus options API arguments. Yeah, so basically it's work. And for the most of us here, it's development. But the thing is that in development, it's not always obvious what the best tool is. Let's take forms as an example. A form can be as simple as a single slider that lets you pick how much you want to spend on a hotel per night. But a form can be quite a complicated one, maybe with a form with hundreds of fields that you have to fill in to get a personalized insurance offer. If you ever struggled by using the same tool to create both types of forms, you are probably missing out on the benefits that different tools can offer. Imagine that you start working on a new project and you get this design plan. And this design plan has a couple of forms. What's common about them is that they look completely different in different parts of the layout. Now, this isn't because designers hate us, it's just that they want to have the best design that caters user experience. I like to call this category of forms UI-first forms. But as developers, we like to think in terms of reusability. So it's very likely that we only have maybe just a single drop-down component that we have to fit into different parts of the layout and mesh the design. So one thing that's very important for us is to be able to do these design customizations very easily. If you're using a UI component library like PrimeView or ShadCN or something similar for these type of forms, I think you are already doing it right. Because UI libraries are designed to be very easily customized, for design-wise. In fact, they are always experimenting with new ways how they can give you the most freedom in customization while keeping their components reasonably reusable. Because as developers, we argue about a lot of things, but there's one thing we all agree on, and that is that we want reusability without any kind of limitation or difficulty in shaping things in our way. But that's not how it works. There's always a trade-off because tools are optimized for different scenarios, which means they will perform worse in others. So what about forms where the design customization is not the primary aspect, but maybe our focus is on gathering a lot of data and we have to render a ton of fields? I like to call this category of forms data-first forms. And in data-first forms, we can easily have hundreds of fields. And so one thing that is very important for us to be able to create these large forms quickly and easily. But these forms introduce other common challenges beyond creating fields, like how to handle nested data, how to repeat elements, how to break them into multiple steps, and so on. If we try to rely only on the UI component libraries that we use, we will likely get annoyed a bit. Because we're going to probably have a ton of markup, and we're going to have to solve the same problems over and over again, and we don't like repeating ourselves. So the question is there a better way to handle with these type of forms? You probably see this coming, that I'm here to tell you there is. My name is Berecz, and I created Vueform, an open source form framework that aims to help you with this problem. About 10 years ago, my brother and I were running this small development agency in Budapest, Hungary, and we were facing these challenges over and over again. I mean, it was 10 years ago, so everybody was basically still using jQuery, including us, but there was not even a proper validation library out there. So I created a solution for our company to help with the form development, and it kind of worked. Later, I talked to other people, and it turned out they did the same, except that I really enjoy working on this tool, and I stick to it for the last 10 years. And the result of that today is Vueform. And Vueform has 3 main goals. First is to make form development easy and simple, so it increases your productivity. Second is to provide out-of-the-box solutions for common form-related challenges, so you don't have to solve them over and over again, so you have less maintenance work, and your project becomes more scalable. Now, the third is to provide a common language for developers when it comes to forms, so it enhances collaboration because it's easier to work on someone else's code. But let's see it in action. After you install Vueform in your project, you're going to have a couple of global components registered. And one of them is Vueform that will serve as a wrapper for our future forms. And Vueform comes with a couple of form elements, like drop-downs, sliders, date pickers, but it has a few more advanced ones, like spreadsheets, matrices, signature, etc. What's common about them is that all of them are available in the open source library, and they are free to use for everyone. And this is how you can add them to your forms. This form is going to have a text input for the name, a rich text editor for the bio, and a slider for the height. But this is too generic. Of course, you want to add properties to it to customize it. You can add, for example, a label, or define how many columns it should take up in a row, or add validation rules. But you can do a bit more advanced stuff, like adding conditions to it. In this case, the password element is only going to be part of the form if the user indicated that they want to create an account by checking that checkbox. But conditions can be used for other things, like make an element conditionally required, or read-only, or disabled, and so on. Here's another example. Imagine that you start working on a new project and you have to create a blog engine. And you have to allow your users to create articles in multiple languages at the same time. In Vueform, you can prefix certain elements with a T, indicating that they should be translatable, and add the multilingual tag to the Vueform component. And the result of that is this. A form that has a language selector, and users can switch between them and fill in the field values in all of them. Now, when the form gets submitted, each field is going to have an object value where each language will have its own different content. The next example is about selects. And select is the most versatile component of Vueform. In fact, I have a separate library for it. It's called Vueform Multiselect, which, by the way, has just recently passed 8 million downloads on NPM. Can I ask if anyone here is using Vueform Multiselect? OK, few people. So Select has quite a few features out of the box, but when used in Vueform as a framework, it can be enhanced a bit further. Let's see how. So this is one way how you can define options for a select in Vueform. And in this case, this is a list of users. But we usually don't store our users on the front end, right? What we likely want to do is load them from an API. So we can also assign an endpoint to the select, and it will load its options from there dynamically. But we can take this one step further. Let's say that we have a country selector that usually comes with a state selector. But we know that states are not for all the countries, but now just to keep things simple, let's say that they are only for US and Australia. But now we have to know what country is selected in order to know what states we should load. To do that, we can add a dynamic query param to the states endpoint that points to the country element. Now what happens is that the state list is going to be empty by default, but when the country is selected or changed, it's going to refetch its options. To keep things more interesting, let's add a third selector here for the city, which will depend on the country and the state as well. And the result of that is this. Okay, one last example here. Say that we have two fields, and the first is an input field, and the second should show some kind of a calculated value of the input field as the output. One way to approach that in Vueform is by subscribing to the change event of the first input field. And by this, we have access to the element, which is basically the view component of the text element itself. And by this, we have access to this component properties and methods. And one property that each Vueform element has is form, which is basically the wrapping Vueform component. And this Vueform component has an L method that gives us access to all the other elements in our form. And currently, we need our output element, and we can use its update method to update its value with our current value times 2. A different approach is by using a static element as the output, because static elements in Vueform can contain anything like string, HTML, or other components. And what's cool about it is that it also has access to this L property. And we can use it the same way to gain access to the input element and use its value times 2 to display as the content for the static. This is just a very simple example, but imagine the flexibility you can have if you can have access to any of the elements in your form this way and basically do anything with them. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are many experienced developers here now thinking, okay, this is nice, but what happens in the edge cases? Will Vueform ever stand in my way and I have to do crazy workarounds just to get some stuff done? Well, one of my main goals was trying to make sure that this never happens when I started creating Vueform. Vueform is designed in a way that you can customize, extend, or replace any part of it using a progressive approach. But what does it mean? First of all, we have CSS variables. Vueform comes with almost 400 CSS variables that lets you customize colors, font size, padding, spacing, and even background colors in like different states like hover and focus. But not everything has a CSS variable, and sometimes you want to change the actual classes of the components. You can add, remove, override, or replace any class of any component in Vueform using this simple syntax. But sometimes you don't only want to change the classes, but also change the DOM structure of the components. And for this, you can use alternative templates. In Vueform, each component has separated business and templating logic, which means that you can assign multiple templates to the same component without affecting its business logic. What does this mean? Here's an example of the file element, and here's the image of the file preview when the file is uploaded. If we set view image, the file element is going to pick a different template for the file preview, and now it will have an image. We can use this to create as many templates as we want, maybe a PDF preview or a video preview for a file element, or in fact any other component, or we can use this to replace the default templates of the components in Vueform. But sometimes you also want to extend the business logic side of things, and for this you can use plugins. This is a very simple example of a Vueform plugin that, as you can see, gets applied to all Vueform elements using regex, but this could be applied only just a single element or like 2 elements or actually any other component of Vueform. And what this particular plugin does is that it adds a unique ID to all of the elements, which means that you can access this unique ID in the elements templates. Or you can write another plugin, maybe for Vueform, to override the data that gets submitted to use these unique IDs for the elements as keys instead of their names. And of course, you can create custom elements in Vueform, because you probably have your custom components and elements in your design system, or you want to use third-party tools like TinyMC, while you can add them just like regular elements in Vueform. I'm not going to get too much detail into this right now, but you can check out the website if you're interested more about it. Okay, I already showed you that this is one way how you can create forms in Vueform, but there's another way. And that's by defining an object of elements and pass them as the schema property to the Vueform component. But if we can do this, we can also do this. We can use a single object to define all the properties of Vueform and use vbind to assign all of them to it. In this example, I used almost everything that I showed you before. Translatable elements, async options, conditions, and so on. So the point of Vueform providing these features out of the box is not only to save you time, but also this: to be able to add advanced features to forms using only a single and simple object, so you are still able to serialize it. Serialization is the process of converting data into a transferable state that can be reconstructed later. In other words, we can turn complex forms into simple JSON and store them in a database. This also allows us to dynamically create forms using almost human terms. I want an input if X is selected, or I want to load my options from my server, or I need a form with 3 steps, and so on. Because data-first forms can be very often defined like this. It's not like you need a custom-looking birthday or email input for your insurance application form, right? We are focusing on gathering data, and we might not even get separate design for these type of forms. If people who aren't actual developers are boss, our client, our PM, or PO are defining these requirements, we are basically just the hand that assembles them, and it's boring. If you are using Vueform, you are probably already at the more productive side of things. But wouldn't it be great if you were only needed for maybe 10% of the things that actually need your valuable development skills? And instead of receiving written requirements from your PM, you would get a 90% ready form without too much effort on their end. Vueform comes with a free-to-use drag-and-drop form builder, and this is just one case it can help you with. People without any coding knowledge can make use of basically 90% of Vueform features without having to learn anything about Vueform first. It can be used to help the work of your development team, to allow anyone in your organization to create forms in any workflow, or to let your actual end users to create dynamically forms in your application. And I think it's the best if I show you it in action. So this is the builder. And one important thing that you need to know about it is everything that you see here comes from the open source library. It's just that it has a UI to it. But as you start building forms in the builder, the result of this will be the same as if it was created by a developer. So in this demo, I'm going to create a registration form of some kind. First, I'm going to assemble the form, and then I'm going to export it in a demo project and start filling in the data. So let's get started. OK. First, let's start by using an AI assistant tool. And I already prepared a prompt which says that create a form with the following fields: first name, last name, email, and password. And I hope that the internet works. Yes, it does. So this is a very simple registration form. Thank you. Actually, we don't need this title here, and we don't need this button, and I need the last name here. So I'm going to create a form with 4 steps, and for this, I will need the steps component. I'm going to add the 4 steps here. The first is going to be account details. The second, profile. The third is to-dos, and then schedule. OK. So account details is ready. For the profile, I will want to use a rich text editor, text input, and a gallery field. OK. And I'm going to rename the editor to bio. The text input to hobbies. But I don't want this text input to have default options, so I will remove them. And instead, I will enable the users to create new options on the fly. And the gallery seems fine. So for the to-do, what I want to have is a list where the users can create to-dos and add them dynamically. And for this, I'm going to use the nested list here. And everything that you put inside here can be repeated. So I will use a text element for the to-do. And I need the radio tabs here. And this will be the ready state. And I want this to have 2 options. For the 0, no, and for the 1, yes. OK, by default, it should be no. I'm going to resize it, and I'm going to make this to-do disabled, but only if the ready state is equal to yes. So the to-do will no longer be editable if the user sets the to-do as ready. Now I need a few headers here. This is for the to-do. Let's clone this, and this is for the ready state. Great. Now for the last step, I'm going to create a small timetable using the grid component. And this comes with a grid designer. And here you can set columns, rows, merge cells if you need to set the aligns. You can do basically everything with it that you can do with the CSS grid itself. And I'm going to need 4 columns here and 2 rows. And this will be the available. This is morning. This is afternoon. and this is evening. Now what I need here is a drop-down that says yes or no. So let's add a select element here and call this yes, no. I don't need a label, but I need to have two options. For 0, no. For 1, yes. Great. Now I want this select in all the 3 places here. So I'm going to create a new element type. That will be called yes, no element. And I'm going to save it. And you can see here that a new category appears that says custom. And now I can reuse this element in our form. Great. Now let's add some styling to our grid. Let's make this bold and centered. And finally, let's switch this to, do you remember that I told you about alternative views? For example, this is how you can switch between them by using a table layout, which looks like a spreadsheet in this case, for the grid element, and we can set column and row headers. And I think this is it with the elements. One last thing here. Probably your application is not using this green, so we can switch to the theme panel here, where we have all the almost 400 CSS variables that I mentioned before, and all of them has an input. Actually, we can change this green to maybe something like a purple. And maybe your form has fully rounded inputs, so we can go to the input section. Input border width, this should be like 20. Yeah, I don't know what happened here. Yeah. So this should be like 20. And now we could go ahead and just like fill in this form. But instead, right now, we will just go ahead and copy this and import it in our project. Now, we can import it or export it as a single file component or schema object or inline. We can stick with the schema object, and we can export the styles globally. Now we'll go ahead and copy it, and I already prepared a demo project for it. It says create account and registration form. I will go to the other screen and look for this file. This is the registration form, and I will just copy everything that I have here. Yeah, now this background looks, probably because I was demoing for some people before, but yeah, this input looks like this, and you can enter data here. Yeah. Let's actually redo the theming, so let's start from scratch. Let's change this color to purple. Once again, change the border radius to 20, change the hover state to 200, and let's re-export it. Now this seems a bit better. And now we have an email address, we have validation, we have tags, we have file uploads, editable to-dos. You can disable them so they're no longer editable. And we have this schedule here. So yeah, I could show you more features. Well, thank you very much. And of course, the most important thing, the builder has a dark mode as well. Yes, so this is one way of using the builder. You can export this code, use it in your project, but you could also open this pop-up and just like copy this as a full JSON. And you can copy it and import it back later. If you want, you can play around with it. Can you see? Actually, I should. You can play around with it at builder.vueform.com. Again, it's completely free to use for anyone. But Vueform Builder also comes with an integrable version. So when it's integrated into a project, your application, users of any kind will create forms. And you can use the JSON export to save them in the database. And you can use this export to load them back to the form builder and restore the state and continue editing. Or you can use it to render the forms anywhere in your application where the users will submit the forms, and you can store that data in your database as well. This way, Vueform Builder can be integrated into any project or workflow by giving you full control over your data without having to rely on any kind of third-party tool. And it comes with a lot of customization options. You can change its layout. You can turn on and off features. You can reorganize panels or remove them if you don't need them. You can customize the list of elements that are available, or you can add your custom ones. Same goes for categories, or you can create configuration options that's on the right side panel. And of course, you can tweak the branding to match your design. And the integrable version of the Vueform Builder is actually a paid product, and this is how Vueform sustains itself. So if you're using a licensed version for it, you are also supporting the open source parts of Vueform. And this is about it. I see a long road ahead of me with Vueform because I see many ways it can be improved and used for more and more exciting challenges. I'm always happy to listen to feedback and ideas. In fact, I set up Vueform's GitHub in a way that everybody can throw in new ideas or give feedback and upvote them. And I actually take these into account when planning new features because I think it's the best if I work on a tool that's useful for the most people. So if you have any idea, feedback, or just want to check it out, feel free to check this, scan this QR. This will take you to the Vueform's GitHub. If you'd like to sponsor my work, there's something even more helpful that you can do for me than sponsoring me on GitHub. If you know anyone who would actually gain value by integrating the builder in their project or workflow, the best thing you can do for me is just let them know about it. Working on Vueform has been the most rewarding professional experience in my whole life, and I'm very grateful that I could be here today and share it with you. We have our booth set up in the main lobby. I have my beautiful girlfriend, my brother, and his beautiful girlfriend here, so you get a whole family package. If you come around and say hi, and maybe spend a real fortune to get your hands on some cool Vueform swag. This would be it, but as this is my first presentation on such a big stage, I'd like to do a little selfie with you, if that's possible. Can I ask for some light, maybe? Okay, great. Thank you very much. See you guys.
All right, give it up for